Sagoli, Nadioliwus, Skanagoga, Skanago. Just said, greetings, what is the news? Are you with peace? I am with peace in Oneida. I love to use the language as it was illegal up until 1990, the Native American Languages Act. So language is culture, language is a form of resistance, form of decolonization, love to decolonize our minds. So Yawanko, thank you, Oneida. Welcome one and all. You all have been phenomenal for week one. Hopping in the group me has been phenomenal. Getting all of our agreements, just getting to know all you all has been amazing. Hearing all of your week one responses was just phenomenal. The minds that we have in this class, they say in Oneida, when we put our minds together, that powerful things can happen. So let's put our minds together. So be it in our minds, as we say in the Oneida opening prayer. Got our talking piece here, our sacred feather and their eagle feather box here, made by my great uncle Leonard. Got my Eleanor Bailey, my grandma, who gave me these eagle feathers. So we're about to hop into it for week two as we get into our talking circle. And I say, Ganalunkwa, it means I love you. You are a human being. Yes, you, who is worthy of love. And I hope you keep taking care of yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Because you, yes, you are love. You are made of love. And our universe is made of love. It's the most abundant thing in the world. And it's a very beautiful thing. I love love. That being said, let's see if we can share some screen here. Here we go. Looking at week two. For week two here, we will play from the start. Again, Dr. Thomas James Reed, Dr. Reed, aka TJ, aka Laguadio. Laguadio ni Yugyux means my name is Laguadio in Oneida, which means he is a good man. When I was a kid, they called me Laksari, which means he is a good boy. But they said that someday he wanted, the idea was for me to be a good man. That was the intention of my name, that I grow into one someday. So that being said, grateful to be with y'all. I'm Wugnukta ni Wugitalota. I am Turtle Clan. I'm Oneida. I'm also English, Irish, and German. Grateful for all my relatives to work to create a better world for 7 generations to come. So I just want to look at some of the ideas here in terms of sovereignty and ideas. We talked a little bit about it, but Indian Commerce Clause is Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3. In the United States Constitution, it recognizes that the United States government is to regulate commerce with foreign nations among several states and with the Indian tribes. So right there in the Constitution, it outlines this sovereignty, this recognition between sovereign tribes. Indian tribes, we're going to treat them the same way, these native tribes, the same way as we do with states and foreign entities. So they're really outlining sovereignty in the US Constitution. Another point here, we look at the Declaration of Independence. So while the Declaration of Independence does not hold a lot of legal standing, it is a document which many people profess to be a beautiful document, which our founding fathers articulated. But when you look a little closer here, look at paragraph 29 in that and tell me what it says. It talks about exciting domestic insurrections amongst us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the quote merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. So right there in the Declaration of Independence, you have some of that systematic, that institutionalized, really racism, that this idea of calling people merciless Indian savages, human beings who were here for millennia before, really with our own languages, culture, dance, ideas, government, but really to be called merciless Indian savages in the Declaration of Independence. And we talk about who is that freedom, who are those ideas designed for? Well, I don't imagine it was designed when people were calling people merciless Indian savages. However, we are in a place now, we're trying to build a country for better generations to come. And I think about, if we were just to give up after what all my ancestors have gone through, it's like, well, what would be the point of what they have fought through? For my good grandfather, for instance, served in World War I before he was a US citizen, after already having been forced to attend Carlisle Indian boarding school. But this notion that Native people are human beings, not merciless Indian savages, goes without saying, but this was talks about here in the Declaration of Independence, the old DOI, as they say. Another one here, when a lot of people, there was this Washington football team once upon a time that had a really tough name. I'm going to say it one time only, because it's a racial slur and I'm not going to repeat it, or you can even read it here on the screen, but it's R-Skin, R-E-D, then skin. I'm not even going to say it because it just cringes me way too much. So look at this. The top part of this is from the Winona Daily Republican, this newspaper in Minnesota, 1863. And it says the state reward for dead Indians has been increased to, quote, $200 for every R-Skin sent to purgatory. This sum is more than the dead bodies of all Indians east of the Red River are worth. So looking at just from our federal government, yes, indeed, that while there's a big push to not teach about Native American history in different states. There's a big push, as pointed out as well, too, not learning about the enslavement that happened towards African peoples here in this country as well, too, to Black Americans. And just truth has no fear from investigation, right? Why would we afraid to learn about the past so we can try to make a better world for those 7 generations to come? But so this is what a lot of people, there was some misinformation on social media about where that word came from. Some people, I remember saying, I was like, oh, it's like people putting berries in their skin. That's not to my understanding. This is one of the more common uses of that word, was being referred to the scalps and heads of Native people. So talking about the scalps for bounties to prove that they killed these Native people through being paid by the government, $200 for every red R skin sent to purgatory. We took a look at these treaties. There was over 374 ratified treaties, which means it had 2/3 approval through Senate, 2/3 approval through House of Representatives. You can flop those processes, but get 2/3 approval through both of those, get a approval from the president, and then it would go through after the 374 treaties. And as pointed out by one of our classmates as well too, was recognizing that these treaties were really done in a really hasty, whatever way you can, as you noted in the videos, whatever way you could have to be able to forge these documents, get people drunk, or supposedly tell them they signed these documents, or different things that people didn't even know the language. So many documents were forged and lied about. But the idea is that these treaties, that all 374 ratified ones have been broken. To my understanding, there's another about 500 non-ratified treaties. So it didn't go through all the proper channels, but they were signed and passed off passed off as that way to these tribal nations. So that would be roughly 871, but let's even just the 374, 874, give or take. But the 374 ratified, these are supposed to be the supreme law of the land. If you look at the Constitution, Article 4, Clause 2 of the Constitution, known as the Supremacy Clause, and it recognizes that all the treaties made shall be the supreme law of the land. So as we look at these treaties, they're not just, oh wow, that was a long time ago, that's really bad. It's like, well, no, these are actually legal obligations, that these are still hold legal merit. These are documents. While to my understanding, every single one of them have been broken, at least in part. Those are still the law, the supreme law of the land, according to the Constitution. My state here in California, unfortunately, had some bounties back in the day in the 1860s, where there were some newspaper advertisements where it was $5 per decapitated head of indigenous peoples, 25 cents per scalp. In the first year that California rolled out the program, they paid $1 million. The second year they rolled out the program, they paid $1 million. Here's an ad down here about mountaineers. They're looking for 30 people to be able to look for the 1st Battalion Mountaineers. And the idea was entitled to a $100 bounty from the United States. And really their whole job was just try to be hunting Native American against the Indians in Humboldt Military District. So it's you can see some of the money they were giving there to people. This again, just systematized, looking at the destruction. Really, when you look at what is the definition of genocide according to the UN? It's the systematic oppression, destruction of a people, language, or their culture. So that would be by definition genocide. Here's another example as well too. We think about these things, oh, that happened so long ago. There is still a great need for restorative justice. So what you all are doing right here is you're taking this class, you're learning, you're acknowledging, educating, and honoring. I am so grateful for each and every one of you. I truly am, from the bottom of my heart. And we look at this. This is from August 17th of last year, 2021. A Colorado governor voids an 1864 order to kill Native Americans. So up until 2021 in August, it would have still been legal under the law to kill Native Americans until this governor voided this order from 1864. So these things, there's still such a great deal for restorative justice in our country in terms of restoration, reconciliation, righting the wrongs of the past, right? A lot of these things that maybe you and I we weren't there for, but it's like, but we have the power to help to right these wrongs, to right these injustices, to talk about these things, to acknowledge that's not okay as human beings, that we are all human beings who are worthy of love. And definitely important to get rid of these different orders that made it legally okay to kill Native American people up until August 17, 2021. This is a picture as well too. It's looking at the Secretary of the Interior in 1950 signing a contract to allow the government to purchase 155,000 acres of the land of the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in North Dakota. The sale was made without the consent of the reservation's business council chairman, George Gillette, who weeps as he watches Krug. You know, I think about a story here with my great-grandfather as well too. These things aren't that long ago, right? My grandma's dad. So when he was in Oneida, Wisconsin, right outside of Green Bay, initially Oneida was in, there's 3 different Oneidas. There's an Oneida, New York, Oneida, Canada, but he's in Oneida, Wisconsin. And this is my great-grandpa. So he has all this land, a great deal of land that he's amassed over his life. Some federal agents come up to him and they say, oh, great, do you have papers for this land? And they say, no, I don't have papers for this land. It's just my land. And he said, okay, well, you're going to need papers for this land if you want to have the land. He said, okay, well, how do I get papers? He said, okay, you have to pay for those papers. You have to buy those papers. He said, oh, I can't afford that. He said, oh, well, now the land is no longer yours. So that's how that went. That's how my good grandpa lost all of his land, because he didn't have papers and couldn't afford papers. So it's not like these things are like so far removed. Like that's still pretty recent. Still things that happen to this day. So big shout out to all you. If this is pulling on your heartstrings right now, if you're feeling convicted listening to this, then please check out digitreaties.org to look at the 374 ratified treaties. So these are the ones they're up there in their old proper English. They're written in cursive. But if you can be a scholar and go through these as a legal scholar, as a law scholar, you could reach out to these tribes and let them know what they are still entitled to. And I've had students in the past do this, and it's a really huge deal. Like so many of these things have been untouched, or they haven't had the time to be looked at or held accountable for. But you as legal scholars could do some consulting to different tribes here, reaching out to them, looking at their websites online and saying, hey, according to this treaty, and just detailing out what they are still entitled to according to the supreme law of the land. So you can go on that website here at digitreaties.org, looking at those treaties. It's just a screenshot of it, but go check it out yourselves. Another good point. So Kelly mentioned, I believe, talking about in our class how this not acknowledged enough, how Native peoples, if they're making these treaties, well, if people don't know the language, like how is this a fair treaty? Or forging of documents, which was noted as when my great grandfather went to Carlisle Indian boarding school, he was forced to attend there, Anderson Cornelius, you can see here. My great grandparents, Isaac and Melissa, this is supposed to be her signature here, right? I remember pointing this out to one of my great uncles, my great uncle, Ben. I remember talking to my great uncle Ben about this just a few years ago, because a lot of this, the different things, these only been released like in 2014, the Carlisle Indian records. But I remember my great uncle Ben was like, wow, that's really weird, because that would have been impossible for Melissa to sign that, because she doesn't know English. She didn't speak English. She can't write English. So how would she have signed a document which says her name on it in perfect English if she doesn't even write or know English? So they just recognizing, well, that's one prime example I can know for a fact, which is a forged document, forged government document, which we have access to as well too. One thing we talk about restoration and reconciliation, pretty exciting. 110 years ago, Jim Thorpe, before he was a US citizen, competed for the United States in the Olympics in Sweden, and he won the pentathlon and decathlon, which is the 5 events and 10 events, gold medal for each. And King Gustav of Sweden said, "You, sir, are the greatest athlete of all time," to which he said, "Thanks, King." And there's also a letter from President Taft talking about how Jim Thorpe exemplified like all the greatest traits of being an American citizen, even though he was not a US citizen yet until 1924, where Native Americans would then be given citizenship. But as we look at this as well too, for a long time, his records were taken from him. They were stripped from him because he at one point had got paid very little to play amateur baseball, even though other people did it at the time, but he was really made an example of and had his medal stripped. So it's really just this last Thursday. I'm talking to you on a Sunday night. On Thursday, his medals are reinstated. But this is just, it's an example of restorative justice, how it's just an action by a committee, but how this impacts not only Thorpe and his family, but for so many other people who've been tracking and watching this for so long. And in Jim Thorpe, he died when he was 65 years old, and he never got to see his medals reinstated, but it was said that he even sunk to depression and alcoholism near the end of his life. And a lot of it was because his medals were taken away. So the same way that Leonard Peltier right now has been a political prisoner for 45 years, freeing of one person means so much more than just that one person. Yes, Leonard Peltier needs to be free for Leonard Peltier, and as a symbol, as a political prisoner for not only Native people, but for all peoples. Because when one of us is suffering an injustice, then there's no justice for all, right? When one person is suffering an injustice, that's injustice for everyone. We need to make sure that there's justice for all. So that being said, another example here, just some of this resistance and restoration, reconciliation through activism. Occupation of Alcatraz, 1969 to 1971. Do check that out if you're interested about it. But it's pretty interesting and pretty powerful. Could go on a long time talking about that. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me during office hours or emails. But powerful. I encourage you to watch this documentary called We Hold the Rock on YouTube if you're curious at all about this. Also, right now we have Resist Line 3. This is going on right now, whereas it's going on in northern Minnesota, where Enbridge is using a oil tar sands pipeline. And right now there's some people, the Anishinaabe, and Garangawa, who are fighting off this land through activism as well. And it's going back to these treaties that the Anishinaabe signed in 1854, 55, and 67. And Line 3 breaks these treaties by threatening the water, land, and wildlife. Indigenous water protectors have even been arrested on charges of trespassing while on treaty land, which is very common. Hundreds of people have been arrested so far from this as well too. So definitely check that out at resist_line_3 on Instagram. If you're curious for learning more, just seeing it, if you have access to that. Another one going on right here. This is in Hawaii. There's apologies for mispronunciation here, but the Ka'ai or protectors form a line blocking the access to Mauna Kea on the Big Island of Hawaii on July 15, 2019. This telescope was to begin construction, one of the largest telescopes in the world. The mountain sacred to Native Hawaiians is known as where the gods reside. So there's still, we talk about, as pointed out as well too, how genocide still happens, colonization still happens. It's not like this thing that happened a long time ago. It's something that's happening in real time as we speak right now as well too. This was an example from Standing Rock. I had the experience to go out there just for a little bit, just for a day, but people were there for about 8 months or so. And this was from November in 2016, when unarmed people were shot at with water cannons and with mace and pepper spray, and also with like these bean bags and like the beans that go inside those bags as well too. People were shot from point blank range. And there was a call when one of the people were trying to report it to the police, and they said, "Who polices the police?" Because they were like, well, because they were trying to call the 911 to report this incident of people being shot at and fired at unarmed people with water guns and mace and these different riot techniques, these suppressing riots. And the person on the Morton County Sheriff's Department in North Dakota says, well, if the police are already there, then it's been reported. But they say, who protects us from the police? And that's such a great question as well too, especially in this instance when we're looking for justice for Indigenous peoples. Just trying to, where it says your prayer is your weapon. When I was out there, that's where the signs were everywhere, just spray painted, your prayer is your weapon. So we look at what does restoration mean as we're fighting climate change and trying to heal Mother Earth. I am Wugnukdani Wagitsalota, which means I'm Turtle Clan, and our responsibility is deeply to protect Mother Earth as well too. So it breaks my heart. I remember watching this on a Facebook Live, watching people get shot at and just feeling really helpless. And the person in the Morton County Sheriff's Department says, well, the next step up is the governor's office. So it's also a call to action for you all, for anyone who's interested in public service, that if you can get into a position of power, you can make a big difference in terms of how people are being impacted by different things, especially with colonization still happening to this day. Some more examples from the water protectors as well. This one right here, it's John Trudell. He passed away in 2015. Says the people must take the political system under their control. There's a great question in the chat, or in our week one response. Like, is it possible to adopt this spiritual restoration here in the United States? Like, are we capable of that? Can we fathom that in the United States? Can we do that? And I think that we're going to need to. If we want to move forward as a country, we're going to figure out a way. I'd say under our current political system, I'd say it's looking like a pretty slim to none chance. But as Chief Warren Lyon says, never take away the people's hope. There is still always hope. And I believe in hope, and I believe in being the change we want to see in the world. So I'm not going to give up. I'm going to try to change this world or die trying. So hopefully y'all can join me in the process, that we are the leaders we've been waiting for, in the words of Grace Lee Boggs, Vietnamese American activist. As we move around here, we look at some of the people in roles of the government. For instance, U.S. Secretary of Interior Deb Haaland, who's Pueblo of Laguna, talks about how their role is to oversee these different tribal lands, which they could never fathom, they could never dreamed of, that when the person who created that role, that a Native American person would be serving in that. Or for instance, Chuck F. Sams III from the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, who's are now the National Parks Director, which is pretty incredible. Maybe you're looking at Kansas's 3rd Congressional District, you'll see Representative Sharice Davids, who's of the Ho-Chunk Nation of Wisconsin, or serving the Idaho House of Representatives from 2014 to 2018 was Paulette Jordan of the Coeur d'Alene. So looking at people of this restoration by being the change they want to see in the world, by taking back these systems that were meant to oppress Native peoples, now being these people within, making a change from within the system and changing the system, therefore. I really like this quote, as I think it's really prevalent to our class right here. It's said here by the BEITC co-chair and Lieutenant Governor of the Zuni Pueblo, Carlton Bowekati. I apologize for the mispronunciation there if I did. But he says here, Carleton says, what can be a better avenue of restorative justice than giving tribes the opportunity to participate in the management of lands their ancestors were removed from? Let that sit with you. I've put together this change.org. You can check it out as well too. If you look at the president, I'll put a link for you all to be able to access it, but it's looking at co-stewardship of all state and national parks with Indigenous tribal nations from local areas. I really think this is something that's doable, it's manageable, that we're seeing different places now in the news. If you're looking at lands being given back to tribal peoples. So I think it is plausible, and I really do. So if you're interested in that, you can sign that as well too, in terms of how do we have that restoration through letting Native peoples give back this land, and not only through nice, kind words and different things, but through our actions. And we can do things by signing different change.org petitions, getting our names on different things. It can show our different elected officials that what we want as the people, and the elected officials are supposed to serve us, the people. I love this one. It's from Prolific the Rapper in the song Black Snakes. And he talks about here how every group of human beings shares the same stars. And if the earth is not your mother, are you from Mars? I love that message of us just all being connected deeply to Mother Earth. And we'll connect more with that later in the semester as well too, in terms of paying the land respect the same way you'd pay relative respect, the same way that you would go and offer it tea or water, or sit with it for a while, sit with a friend, just to pay the land. And I would definitely encourage us to do that throughout the semester here, even 5 to 7 minute increments, but we'll talk about that later. So some of the different ways that RJ shows up through these different Indigenous practices. And again, we talk about Indigenous people, we're talking about North and South America. We're talking about people in Africa. We're talking about people all over the world as well too, who are doing these things. So it's pretty amazing, as noted in our group meet, just that connection, that when you're seeing this happen, these similar spiritual, these similar practices of community, of communication, different spots across the world. So what does that say about us as human beings, that we have this innate, somehow written in our DNA to come in a circle, just to be able to hold space like that? How does that come to be? But it's worth examining. And I do love seeing the commonalities. So we talk about my Oneida relatives using an eagle feather fan. The eagle is seen as the highest, the liaison between us and the spirit world, very sacred. The Apache have used and still use, to my understanding, a burden basket, which is this, as a picture of it right there, but you passing this around, you're putting your burdens into it, the basket, as you're going around as well too. It's one way to start a circle. The Lakota have used, still used, to my understanding, a sacred pipe. In this sacred pipe, one of my great uncle Leonard, he had once participated in a sacred ceremony, a Lakota sacred pipe ceremony. Just a couple times he had, but he said that it was deeply spiritual. The process started at nighttime and went all the way through until the next morning. So it wasn't really off a conventional Gregorian calendar of time or hours and minutes. It was just very much a spiritual experience, where the person who was leading it would like pack the sacred pipe with tobacco, usually, as they're going through, kind of talking about setting the circle, creating the container as they start. And then you'd be passing on to the left. As it came around, you'd kind of rotate it in a clockwise fashion. You'd pull from the piece, and then you'd kind of be talking. You might pull from it again as you're talking. But that's the Lakota using the sacred pipe. And I apologize for mispronunciation here as well too. I believe it's Gayagiagawa. An indigenous people of the Pacific Northwest have been known to use a speaker staff. Here's a picture of a person constructing one of those speaker staffs, this indigenous person in the Pacific Northwest. Shifting continents here, looking, and I apologize if I mispronounced, but Akan chiefs in Western Africa using a linguist staff. Again, I'm not entirely sure the pronunciation, but I believe Okiame Poma as a royal spokesperson. A picture of that in the bottom right, looking as this advisor and spokesperson, this having a really symbolic and really important meaning, this linguist staff. And when we think about Africa as well too, one of my mentors, Dr. Pamela Taylor, she is an elder in Kenya, the nation of Kenya as well too, in Africa. And I remember them telling me this story when they had the opportunity to go back to the village where Obama's grandmother is on his patrilineal side, so on his father's side. And he goes, and Dr. Pamela Taylor was with them, and with a group of people going to visit this village where Barack Obama's grandmother was from. And as they were going through, they were met in a circle. As they first came here, that the people who were welcoming him, Obama's grandmother, was in a circle. They were all together, and as the people came through the circle, that they said welcome home, and they would give them a big hug. And it's how powerful that notion is of being in a circle. And I think about this African notion of Ubuntu as well. This idea of I am because we are. And just how powerful that notion is as well too. When we think about restorative justice, I am because we are. The Maori of New Zealand, looking at another continent as well too. Not entirely sure the pronunciation, toko toko, but the ceremonial talking stick, an example of that in the bottom left as well too, would be an example for the Maori. But many different indigenous peoples using these practices to come together and to speak, whether it's for community or addressing issues. So I would ask you all that one of our last things here for this week 2 video is to think about this imagined future. And if this is from the story of Dene Elder, his name was Art. He once told me, and he said that there was this time at the beginning of creation where all of creation was together. And this bear said, well, look what I can do. This bear took this big tree, lifted it out the ground, and threw it on the ground. This deer said, well, look what I can do. This deer ran by and in one jump, jumped over the tree. Then the human being said, well, look what I can do. If I close my eyes, I can imagine a world like this one, only better. So this Dene Elder said, it is our responsibility as human beings to imagine that place in our minds, that imagined future, that better place, and then to take people to that imagined place. So I know we are in some tough times, to say the least. I believe as a country, as a world, I think I'd be sugarcoating it, saying it that way. But at the same time, there's such a need for restoration. There's such a need for healing. So what you all are doing is really important work, whether you're helping animals, the environment, people who've suffered abuse, whether you're just new to RJ, you're deep in the RJ game, you are a human being who is worthy of love. I'm so grateful that you were in this class. I'm so grateful to learn from you. Yawanko, Ganalunkwa, Nugiwa. It means thank you. I love you. Until next time. Remember, if ain't nobody loves you, Dr. Reed loves you. Don't be a stranger. I'm here to help you. I'm in your corner. I want to help you develop throughout this semester as best you can. But you, yes, you have been phenomenal. And I will be seeing you throughout the week. So, Yawanko, Ganalunkwa, Nugiwa.